And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, and as always on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. Joining us this evening is Hannah Stern. She has taken time from her evening to join us to discuss an ongoing situation, if you will. 3 cities in principle in the state of Rhode Island, Cranston, Pawtucket, and Woonsocket, soon to be joined by a city near you. I have no doubt, editorial, I'll mention this, that other cities are standing by, perhaps not so callous or so brave as these 3 cities, waiting to see the combination of the public reaction, the legal reaction, the constitutional reaction, and most importantly, probably in their eyes, the financial reaction, all right, to a program that this show finds offensive, and certainly the American Civil Liberties Union of Rhode Island sees offensively. There's a program called ALPR, Automated License Plate Reader. And I'll ask Hannah to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. But ultimately what this means is a law enforcement officer, a.k.a. Leo, sits at a side of the road, aims this device, if you will, at license plates, and ping, 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 records come up, until there's a violation. And then I'm assuming, if anyone has ever seen the movie Monsters, Inc., where the monsters drop down from the ceiling all over the road, all over the driver, and haul them off into an uncertain fate. A lot of issues with this. The company involved, by the way, is a company called Flock Safety. Hannah, first of all, thank you for joining us. After a while, one becomes so bitterly cynical that one can't help have some sort of a dark, morbid sense of humor about these things. Let's start from the beginning. Did I aptly describe the technology from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and thank you for having me, by the way. It's great to be back with you. I think that you definitely described it accurately. I mean, I think that the gist is really that what these cameras do and what we've discovered that they do is they basically take a picture of every vehicle that goes by 24/7. So they're mounted somewhere on the street, they're facing the street, and they're tracking every single car that passes by every single hour of every single day, and essentially creating a really large database of all of this information. So obviously there are huge privacy issues at play here. Obviously it's very concerning that these cameras are indiscriminately picking up information about where people are at what time, how often they're driving by there. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of concerning aspects to this technology for sure.
Now, one would expect that something with this order of, I'll call it the intrusiveness order of magnitude, for lack of a better term, would have gone before a relatively high level of public review, peer approval, analysis, conversation. Did any of that happen in any of these cities at any level?
Well, so that's actually one of the things that we're really concerned about. I think that our concerns are kind of on, we have 2 major concerns when we talk about the implementation of specifically these flock safety cameras. One is the one that I just talked about, which is the inherent privacy issues with any type of surveillance technology. The second issue, which we think is extremely serious, is that there was really no public input, no public transparency, no solicitation of public opinion on the implementation of these systems and this technology. That's obviously a really huge issue, because if the public doesn't know that they're going in and their privacy is being violated, that's a massive problem. And so that was really one of the big concerns that we had, were when we found out about these programs, and we found out that they were basically happening through unilateral decisions at the law enforcement level within the police departments, and with no notice to city council, with no public hearing. This was, of course, a huge cause for concern for us.
And isn't a less often discussed aspect of the controversy surrounding and I'll use the coalition air quotes here, relationship between citizenry and law enforcement is this sort of a top-down management approach where, as opposed to preventing crime, as opposed to the emphasis being on education, as opposed to the emphasis being on the relationship between the community and law enforcement, instead what we've got a results-driven orientation where success is based on or analyzed on, or the perspective of success is how often we get them. Do you see that in the same perspective I do?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I definitely, I understand what you're saying. And I think that we have a very similar concern in that I think that what we're told when there are these new surveillance technologies that get implemented is that we basically have what is a false choice between public safety and privacy, right? Where we're told you can either have one or the other. This is either a way to protect the community, and you just have to give this up as a part of functioning in that community. But that's just actually not true. What public safety actually is the result of community-oriented systems. It's the result of tools that are directly and tangibly supporting residents. And it's not, and it has never been, ever, the consequence of indiscriminate 24/7 surveillance. So to act as though the way to get public safety is through the imposition of these programs, which are immediately harming the privacy of all residents in the area in which these surveillance tools are being used, is really not a fair It's really not a fair thing to say. And I think it's also really dismissive of the work that communities do for public safety. I think it's really dismissive of the very legitimate privacy concerns that all residents have and should have when these surveillance tools are being implemented in their communities.
Now, and I say this with tongue planted firmly in cheek, of course there are all the usual concerns that are so often so inadequately addressed. And we're talking about the storage of the data. We're talking about who's got access to the data, the portability of the data, and then there's the cost of our safety, which never appears to be inexpensive. Have any of those issues been addressed in terms of, the greater privacy picture?
Well, so I think that you're actually hitting on something which is a part of both of our big concerns, right? The privacy aspect and then the public transparency aspect, which is that the policies that we have been told today, that Flock Safety, which is the company that, of course, is operating these cameras, the policies that we're told today and the privacy policies that they have and the way that they store their data and the destruction of the photos. So, for example, right now we're told that all photos within the system are destroyed after 30 days. That's true right now. It may not be true in the future. And because there's no ordinance and no statutory guidance, which actually ensures that that continues on into the future, and because there's been no ordinance put in place that had public input, we really have no idea when or if these policies could change. And because it's at the complete discretion of a private company and at the law enforcement agencies. Right. So I think that concern really hits on both of these issues, which is that we really have no control over the way that this data is being managed. We have no control over the way that it's being transmitted or stored. And because we have no control over it, that puts us in a really vulnerable position.
Mm-hmm. And given the extensive levels of conversation that took place, both from the perspective of the community, law enforcement administration, and of course, law enforcement unions over body cams, the notion that this would be slipped in, if you will, literally in the middle of the night is astonishing to me. And let me just pile on just a little bit, and I'm not going to ask you to react to that. I'll ask you for the first part. The second part of this question, I'm just going to make a statement. It is of no coincidence in my mind, in your host's mind, that the cities of Cranston, Pawtucket, and Woonsocket were the first to jump on this, because in this station's opinion, those are the three police departments that are, well, have rather sordid pasts. One was the subject of a state takeover. In the case of Pawtucket, it should be the subject of a state takeover. And Woonsocket, while not in the league of the first two, has had its own brushes with the law internally and how it treats citizens. What are your thoughts on all of that? Pick and choose what you want to comment on. Fair game.
Well, I mean, I think that what you noted earlier, which is that this was really kind of just slipped in and was really quite contrary to the way that a lot of surveillance technology has gone through a public process, like you noted with the utilization of body cameras. And I think that actually one of the things that I think is really important to emphasize now, and which we emphasized in the letter that we sent to the Pawtucket City Council, the Cranston City Council, and the Woonsocket City Council today, is that the way that these programs are being implemented is not only directly contrary to what we should expect from a public institution when it comes to technologies that impose on privacy and that should be subject to really stringent public transparency standards, but the way that these programs were implemented is also directly contrary to the suggested policies from the company that these cameras are being operated through. So Flock Safety on their website actually links to guidance from the ACLU, from the National ACLU, that calls for the statutory adoption of policies which promote community oversight of these types of police surveillance. That didn't happen. What these ordinances do is really go into detail about how these technologies could be potentially discriminatory and how they could be stigmatizing. And there's a reason why Flock is encouraging that municipalities put these standards in place before they implement these programs. So I think it's really distressing that not only did this not happen just in terms of the right thing being to ask for public input, but I think it's also really disturbing that the way that this was implemented was actually directly contrary to what the company itself that is operating these cameras suggests that municipalities should be doing.
You know, we spoke today. I promised I wouldn't keep you on for our normal 2 or 3 hour roundtable conversation.
I appreciate that.
But in closing, and if you're just joining us, Hannah Stern is from the Rhode Island chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union is joining us. They issued another statement today about these Flock, air quote, safety cameras. What's the next step? To what degree are they in place? And then, other than summon outrage, what power do citizens have?
That's a great question. And I think that, so I'll try to be brief with my answer, but I think that one of the big takeaways is to know that these programs are in use currently. They are in their pilot program stage. We know because the Cranston Police Department has a transparency portal where they list the number of searches that they do using Flock safety cameras. We know that they're in use. I think at the time that the letter went out this morning, I think that there had been over 2,000 searches done through the system using these photographs that have been taken during the pilot program. So we know that they're in use. What we've called for is for these 3 city councils where we know that these programs are being utilized. So again, in Pawtucket, Woonsocket, and Cranston, we've called for the city councils to put a complete halt to the program. We've called for the city councils to tell the law enforcement agencies that they cannot be using this technology. And then we've also asked them to immediately enact ordinances that promote community engagement, ensure community oversight, and ensure community transparency so that any future law enforcement surveillance tools that are even considered don't get implemented in the manner that they did this way, in a really opaque and a very subversive way, like these were implemented. So those are really the big things that we've asked for. And I think that what everyone should be doing, if this is concerning to you, is contacting your city councilors and ensuring that they will not support these programs and that they will support ordinances that, again, ensure that community oversight and that community transparency, which was so sorely needed in this process and was completely lacking.
And 2 final thoughts on that. I'll point out I happen to be a resident of the city of Cumberland, the town of Cumberland, and about a year and a half ago, then Mayor Murray suggested that perhaps we should adopt a police stance in Cumberland, not unlike that of North Attleboro, where all you need to know is many a Red Sox or Patriots player career has gone to die after being pulled over on random searches. Notice I said he's the former mayor of Cumberland. He was hoisted. It didn't go well. And that was directly as a result of citizen input. Also, as you folks point out, there is a city council meeting I believe this coming Monday night. We're going to post it, and we're going to double check to see that this is on the agenda. If you live in Cranston or you simply believe in civil liberties, you should stop down to Garden City, have a little brunch, a little lunch, and then join the Friendly Burgers over at the City of Cranston and bring your concerns up in a forthright, polite manner at public input. And that's always an important part of the process, isn't it?
I couldn't agree more. I think it's the most important part of the process.
Excellent. Well, Hannah Stern, thank you so much for joining us. I love these quick interviews because there's so much going on, and the ACLU always has something to say about it. So, again, thank you for the ACLU's work, the support, the public outreach, the interaction with the independent media that you folks are so willing to do. It's a big part of our programming here, and I look forward to having you on again. Yeah,
of course. Thank you so much for having me. It was a great cap to my day, so thank you.
Excellent. Folks, we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage, porn-free, civilly disobedient media. You know where to find us. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a couple moments.